Now, he calls that breakdown, and one of the questions that we wanted to explore, I think, and I would invite you to give me your impressions of this as well. He has this idea that when he went through his breakdown and he was just sitting in almost a catatonic state, ignoring biological needs, he wasn't eating, he wasn't drinking, he wasn't even getting up to go to the bathroom.
That's
letting
right.
Cigarettes, letting cigarettes burn into his fingers and this kind of thing. And to anybody looking at that from the outside, that's crazy behavior. If you think about him saying that he was having an experience of some form of enlightenment, then you have to wonder, well, that doesn't appear to be the kind of enlightenment you would envision for, let's say, Buddha sitting under the Bo tree. Yeah. So why would he ignore bodily functions? And it could have been that he was so intense, he went to some sort of a very intense inner place where he was trying to get beyond rationality and duality. And he was so focused, I think, maybe on this goal that he wanted to ignore all sort of normal responses calling out to him from the biological world, and just wanted to go into that inner space. And he seems to believe that he achieved some sort of breakthrough in that. He says that had he ran into a, let's say, a shaman or a Zen priest or something, that they could have helped him to realize a deeper meaning and realization of his inner self, or something that we might associate with enlightenment. Instead, he got locked up into a mental institution, and they put him into shock therapy sessions. Now, after the shock therapy, now he's ready and tries to start using meditation. And so that's one change that did occur. So I'm thinking that when he's talking about finding greater enlightenment through that experience, that he's probably now seen some sort of level of consciousness that's within all of us that he wants to explore, and that he can do it when he learns to sit and meditate and quiet the outer rational mind and its constant inner chatter, so that he can begin to perceive deeper inner world. Anybody that meditates at all knows that after a while you are watching your thoughts and your feelings go by like clouds in the sky. They keep happening, but you just watch them and you become the observer of them. And then at some moment you might ask yourself the question, who is this observer? If I'm not my thoughts and I'm not my desire patterns that I'm seeing float by, who's this observer? What's that part of my consciousness? So there's a layer there that you discover in meditation, and that when you reach that, it somehow helps you detach from outer circumstances, and it helps people in hospitals and everywhere else are using meditation now, because it helps people find their kind of a center of their being, where they are more harmonious and not as caught up in the outer expressions of the world, not overreacting, but finding that inner space, which Zen practice, certainly as far as what they call beginner's mind, is attempting to bring you to that kind of place where you are not just putting everything into its category and practices and routines and etc. So and also because you have to remember that Robert was a scientist when he was younger, and he still wants to reach out to the science community, even as he becomes a philosopher. He still wants to bring them along. And also he realizes that there has been this inculcation of our culture with the scientific methodology and the scientific materialistic world and that perception. So he creates a philosophical idea around quality, because it's a term that you can't just dismiss. If you call it God, if you call it Holy Spirit, if you call it inner Christ light, whatever else, you might be just as accurate. Or you call it, in the case of Plato, the good, right? You could get away with calling it that. At one point in the book, he talks about going into the book on Tao, the Lao Tzu book that he had, and he reads it and he says, everywhere that there is the Tao, you could replace the word quality, and it exactly matched.
Yeah, the Tao.
Yeah, but then you say we ask the question, well, then why don't we just read Taoism? Is MOQ just Taoism in a different language or different words? And I've thought about that, because I think that's an important and interesting question to explore. And the fact is, I believe that it is beyond just a different representation of Taoism. defining what quality is somewhat different than his desire to have us understand how to apply dynamic quality throughout our lives, and bringing that into our scientific orientation, and so that we can break away from being locked into the limits of rationality and rational thinking, and explore different parts of our inner worlds,
Yeah.
And we have those inner worlds. It's just that we don't cultivate them in our Western society.
It's very
where
true.
they do in the East, but we don't do it here. Ours is a kind of an industrial educational system.
Yeah.
And you go from one subject to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's just a collection of more and more facts, more and more knowledge.
That's right. Yeah.
But it doesn't have much to do with the inner part of yourself, which ultimately, in Pirsig's view, and I agree with this view, we have a very technologically oriented society, a materialistic oriented society, which has provided tremendous benefits, but at the same time, a certain sense of alienation, a certain sense of estrangement from our inner self. And how to reconnect with that is what Pirsig is trying to describe, and trying to find a way to do it that's non-dogmatic and non-religious, but has to do, like Buddhism is, in fact, Buddha's teaching, not especially religious. It's an exploration of consciousness that will be different for everybody, So back to the question, did he achieve enlightenment when he went through the breakdown? There was some kind of breakthrough. There was some kind of change that occurred, and not just because of the shock therapy, but because of something that happened to him. Whereas before, he was very dismissive of the idea of meditating, thought it was a waste of time, and he was much more in the scientific, materialistic, sort of analytical mind. And he was trying to explore these things with analysis all the time. His book is full of analysis. What's that?
With the analytical knife.
Yeah, with the analytical knife, right,
Yes.
which he uses. And it's a wonderful tool, but it is only a tool, and it doesn't necessarily ultimately get you to that inner space that he's trying to have all of us realize. I was listening to a recording of one of the last interviews that he took, and the lady that interviewed him said that he actually took her down to his basement where he had his tools and different things, and that she noticed that he was very much in the centered space, that he lived in a state of kind of that dynamic quality that it describes, that he did have that kind of sense of what's present, what's best, what's now, what's here, beyond dualism and all of that. So